Edwin Freeman is a practicing rabbi and also a family therapist. Wrote a book called Freedman's Fables. It's a collection of very thought-provoking stories. And I'd like to tell you one of those stories. It's one that Rabbi Freedman entitles A Nervous Condition. When little John was about a year old, his parents discovered something strange about him. There were little fibers protruding from his body, all over his body. Otherwise, he was very healthy, but that concerned them. And they also noticed that because of that, they thought, he was very sensitive to pain. They took him to the family doctor, who had never seen anything like this. He immediately called in some of his colleagues, some specialists. It was long before he had a number of doctors that were examining him. And one of the specialists reported to his parents, "We really don't know what's causing this. But it appears that his ganglia, his nerve endings, are growing outside of his body." We don't know of anything like this in medical history. But since he's normal in every other way, the only thing we can suggest is that we just wait, and maybe it'll take care of themselves. We do have to tell you, though, that you must be very sensitive around him because of the nerve endings, he's extremely subject to pain. Well, his parents were very sensitive people anyhow, and they would never do anything to hurt his feelings. And so they took him home and began to watch over him. And little John grew. But as he grew, so does his nerve endings. And it wasn't long, by the time he got ready to go to school, that his nerve endings, his ganglia, trailed behind him as he walked. It did have some advantages, he found out. For one thing, anybody who knew him and knew anything about his condition were very careful not to step on the ganglia, not to hurt him. And because of that, he could pretty much go anywhere he wanted to. For example, if he wanted to get in front of a line that was standing at the cafeteria, he would just walk toward the front and everybody would move away. So little John used this, of course, to his advantage quite a bit. Everybody was sensitive and was very careful not to hurt him. This is not to say that some people didn't resent it. His classmates, for example, when he went out for sports, he always got first priority, first place. His brother, who was very competitive with him, was at a disadvantage. But they knew better than to say anything because of poor little John. Little John graduated from high school. Although the records show that he did a lot less homework than anybody else, he got a job. Although here again, it was pretty clear that he was less qualified than some of the other people who wanted the job. But life went on. Then one day little John met a woman that he really liked. She was a woman of poor self-esteem. She was very shy, didn't think too much of herself, didn't have any other suitors. And she was so flattered when little John took an interest in her, even though he was a strange-looking creature. And it wasn't long before they married. She pitied little John. After a while, the pity turned to love, and she accepted as her task taking care of John. This was not too bad. At first, she enjoyed caring for him, but it was at the expense of taking care of herself. After a while, she started getting headaches. And then there was a little tick over her right eye. Her condition started getting worse. She began to lose weight. She developed colitis. She got depressed. All the time keeping it from John. She didn't want to do anything to hurt him. And she certainly couldn't talk to him about how she felt. So she did have some friends that she talked to, and she confessed some of her feelings to her family. At one point she went to her family doctor. And by this time she was beginning to have more feelings of depression and even suicide. One day as she was coming back from the grocery store, she stopped by an alley and saw a mother kitten nourishing her baby kittens. And it was intriguing to her. She watched the whole process, and she watched as every little kitten would squirm around and get to its place, and the mother cat would take a paw and guide the kitten to where she needed to be, and then when the little kitten was full, was nourished, the little kitten would fall back and go to sleep. All of them except one. She noticed the one little kitten was lame. Apparently had been born with a lame leg. And interestingly enough, this was the most aggressive of all the kittens, because this little kitten would squirm around and get in front, push all the other kittens out of the way to get his milk. And as he did, the mother kitten would gently move him aside, and he'd come back, more aggressive every time, until finally his mother would whack him a little bit. When that didn't help, she gave him a couple of firm whacks and pushed him out of the way. And Little John's wife looked at that and she said, "Oh, what an insensitive mother to do that to her baby kitten." She went on home. When she got home, Little John was in the living room reading. His wife stood in the door watching him, just staring at him. After a while, he got up and decided to go into another room. He just stood up, started, like he always did, and started walking toward the door, expecting her to move aside, but she didn't. She just stood there. He was a little confused. This had never happened before. He never thought about asking her to move. He'd never had to. But he got a little closer and she didn't budge. And we got close to her. He said, what are you trying to do? Why aren't you moving? Don't you know I need to go to the other room? His wife didn't say anything. Just stared at him, but didn't budge. And Little John didn't know what to do. So he started to back up. When he started to back up, she advanced toward him. He backed up a little faster, and she came even faster. Pretty soon he was in the corner. He said, "What are you trying to do to me?" And when he said that, she picked up her foot and stomped as hard as she could on one of his ganglia. And he cried out, whether from pain or just shock of her aggressive behavior, and he would cry out and she'd stomp again. Stomp! Stomp! And he managed to get by her and started running from her, and she chased him with his nerve, his ganglia trailing behind him. And as he ran, she ran behind him, stomping up and down the stairs, into the cellar, to the attic. Finally, she chased him into their bedroom, where both of them by this time were exhausted, and they fell asleep on the bed. She woke up first, and she realized for the first time in months she didn't have a headache. The nervous quiver in her eye was gone. She could breathe. She really felt relaxed. But that wasn't near as surprising as what she saw beside her. She looked over at little John, and all his nerve endings, all his ganglia, were gone. She looked closer and realized that what had happened is that they all had retracted inside of his body. And when John woke up, he realized he felt better. And as the saying goes that ends all happy tales, they lived happily ever after. Isn't that a good story? I'll leave it to you to decide what to do with it.